As a child, I had a great life. I was interested just in dancing, really. Going in as Stedfords, going to ballet exams, things like that. And when I was 12, we went up to Tamworth for 2 years. Up there, I got involved in diving, and I was the junior diving champion of Tamworth High at that stage. And when we came back, I got back into the dancing again. And I actually was in the ballet of the last show on the Tivoli, Harry Wren's last show, which was Shapery. And then I was also travelling with Harry Wren. He had a show that travelled around New Zealand called, forgotten what it was even called now, Gay Fiesta. And that was a fun time. Well, when I met my husband, I was only about 18, but we got married when I was 19. And before I was 21, 10 days before I was 21, after I was 21, I had twin boys. 18 months later, I had a girl. 5 years later, I had twin boys.
Oh, wow.
5 years later, I had a girl. And my husband signed off at that stage. And we lived down at Dulles Point, had a lovely house because I was crazy on tennis. Played competition 3 days a week and played social rest. And I coached tennis. I taught yoga for 10 years. And just a nice life, just enjoying life. My husband, being a solicitor, he often saw places he liked. Well, he found one at St Ives that he liked. It had a pool, whereas Dulles Point didn't have a pool. So off we went to St Ives for a few years. In about early 70s, he found another place that he loved at Bayview. Now that, apart from the views, it also had a swimming pool and room for a tennis court. So he and the boys worked and built the tennis court. So we played comp there. It was a great life. I actually had, by this time I had an Opal business, duty free at the airport. I used to work at that just 25 hours a week. And so life was going along swimmingly. And then in 81, my husband dropped dead of a heart attack unexpectedly, never been sick, had no knowledge that he had problems. And that changed our lives, of course. And I thought, well, I can't stay here at Bayview, much as I loved it. It was too expensive, too much for me. And so I bought a house at Coleroy. And the family went to Coleroy for a while. And then my mother and father found a block up here at Mona Vale. And at the same time, Lancome opened the Pittwater Grove estate, which is all of this area around here. And it was only then that all of a sudden the community came into focus for me. The first thing was down near Pittwater High School, there was a land, lot 100, in Bassett Street, and the government decided that it could contain 39 medium density dwellings right near the waterway coming out of Mona Vale into Pittwater. And we were well aware that it was floodland.
Yeah.
We used to, one day in the night time, we realised it was all flooding. So we went down and my husband was standing around with eels swimming around his feet because the water came up through the drain and flooded all of the land and the road too. So we took photos and anyhow eventually proved to the government that it was flood-prone land. So I realised then that what you could do just by going around the community, raising up an issue that was important. And so that was the first thing that I got interested in and won that particular battle. And the next one was in this reserve, or there was a reserve in this estate. And the council was thinking what they're going to do with it. And I started saying, it's a passive reserve, it's here for this community. You can't take it away. And so I started fighting the council on on the reserve here in Bangalow Avenue.
This is the one that's now named after you, correct?
That's right. So that one, of course, was just grass. There was one tree at the end. There was nothing. It was just grass. And so I started, actually Robert Dunn and Eric Green, two councillors of Ringa Council, realised I was starting to write to them saying, I've got a problem here, I've got to preserve this land. And they said, well, you better make yourself a community group. So I formed the Pittwater Grove Residents Group. And I was a president, and we started the battle. Eventually, I met up with Bruce Waters, who was an engineer with Ringa Council, and he drew me up a plan like how to be if you could win the battle. You could have this kind of park. So I then started battling for that particular park. And around about 1988, which is bicentennial year, they decided to back it. They had some funds, not a lot. It was 50,000 to make the park. And they said, oh, but your plan is 100,000. So I got 3 landscape garden people to quote me the park at this park as per plan, as Bruce Waters' plan. And they did. They quoted it at the 50,000. So Ringa Council decided perhaps they could build it for 50,000.
You put them in a box on that one.
And they did. And it was amazing. I've got photos of it just as when it started, you know, a few trees planted here and there. They had wanted just to put casuarinas around it. I said, you're joking, that's no park. So, of course, eventually they agreed to make it per plan. And the next thing that happened, all of the areas that were planted were this high in weeds. And I thought, oh, what have I done here? So I used to go around and collect newspapers from all the people that those days they didn't have recycling like now. And I had a garage full of newspapers. And so I got a group to come down every weekend, every Saturday or Sunday, and we'd lay papers, and the council would drop a load of bark. And each weekend we'd lay the paper, lay the bark, and gradually worked around the whole park. And I've got a photo of my husband and my mum and I doing this paper in the bark. So that stopped all the weed problem. So at that stage I was quite involved in fighting for the community, marching up and around the streets all the time, you know, on the issue, need this, got to do that. The only thing was the park had no playground equipment. So then I walked the streets again, going to all the factories, asking them would they please try and help the fund to raise money to put in the playground equipment. It was 14,000, which was a lot at the time. Yep. We put in the equipment, that equipment's still there. I'd love to see something new, but the equipment that we put in there from the community is still there now today.
Well, it stood the test of time because my kids played on that equipment.
Isn't that lovely? Then came the fight for Pittwater. I joined the committee, of course, and Robert Dunn and Eric Green were very involved. And Robert Dunn's wife said, if you're going to run for council, I want you to have someone backing you. So he asked me, would I run with him? And of course, when Pittwater was formed, I was part of the new council. And it was a few years, just before Eric Green died. He died of an unexpected heart attack as well. And the week...
Eric Green?
Eric Green.
Yes, because he used to come to the service station. I worked at the service station at Monvale, and he would come in there pretty much every day and buy a packet of cigarettes.
I know, that's what killed him, of course.
In his bomby old car.
When we go on inspections, he'd go up half the hill and then sit down and say, had it. And then the week before he died, he came over to me at council and he said, save Winneramy Bay. I had been fighting for it because it was already under threat, but not badly. You know, we just were watching it. And then all of a sudden the council set up a committee. I was part of that committee, the Winneramy Bay Committee, and they had in these consultants. So for 6 weeks we sat in this committee, and then the consultants decided what they had in mind all the time. They said it's suitable for medium density. We're going to have it for that. All of that land had been sold. The Ringa Council sold it to the government for depots and so forth, and the government didn't use it. It was just a rubbish track. And after being on, I was by this time mayor, and on this committee, I realised they want to use this to make a lot of money. So Angus Gordon was a fantastic general manager when I was mayor, and I went to him and I said, Angus, we've got to save the bay. What can we do to save this bay? And he was a can-do kind of guy. We had down at the bay, we had the works depot and the waterfront depot. Both of them was around the bay. He said the only way we could do it, we'd have to sell our depots and buy the whole land package, 12 hectares it was, that the council had sold to the government for about 500,000, and we paid 5 million to buy it all back. And that was at that price because we were going to protect it forever, so nobody could ever build on it. So we actually auctioned off the land, the depots, and with that money paid the 5 million to buy and built the park, and also built the depot at Warriewood that they use now.
At Boondah.
Boondah.
Yeah.
So all that was done with the money raised for all that area that once been the depot. So that was a wonderful, amazing achievement for
Well, it's one of the most popular parks in the
it's loved to death, but
area.
it makes me so happy to see it being used, because that's what we wanted to do, to be used for the community. The other really important one we had was, all of a sudden, at Oxford Falls, you see all the land built on around the escarpment. And all of a sudden, things were starting to happen. And I said, don't we own that land? And we didn't. Most of the land around the escarpment was in private ownership. And again, I said to Angus, how can we save? He said, the only way we could do it is have an environmental levy. Well, I said, who would want an environmental levy? So I used to write to the community in my Beryl column all the time, and I explained that if we wanted to save the escarpment, we'd have to sell property, we'd have to buy it, and the community backed me all the way. And we were able to raise from the environmental levy enough. We also swapped one parcel of land. There's a lovely waterfall and bushland area down near Irrawong, down in the back of Warriewood.
Yeah.
Comes down from the golf course. But anyhow, that was in private ownership. They wanted to do something. So that land was swapped for some land that the council owned. Sanitary depot was up there, you know, they had to, all of the land had to be made back to normal. Remediate, yeah. And so they swapped that parcel, but they bought a lot of other parcels. So now when you look at Warriewood, most of the land has been saved. And of course, when Pittwater was formed, we also saved the wetlands.
Yes.
That was a big save, all those wetlands. We put in the wetland walks, and so that was a big one for the community. Some of the other things we did was Currarong, was the battle for Currarong. Now Currarong's safe as well.
That's been well rebuilt, hasn't it? They've done a great job.
Yes. So that was one of the things that these amazing things were saved, which wouldn't have been saved if we hadn't formed. So even if our council only lasted, I was on council for 20 years and mayor for 7 terms, if that's all we'd had, is a period of 22 years altogether, we saved a huge amount. We actually won the Blewett Award as the most progressive council in New South Wales when we were a young council because of the things we were achieving, huge amounts. And I mean, so that's a pretty good record. The fact that we lost Pittwater is a shame, but I don't mind because I feel if that was what we were there for, to save all of those areas.
Still a big achievement.
We did that, and it wouldn't have happened if we hadn't have formed Pittwater. The other big battle, of course, which was won and lost, was Mona Vale Hospital. That was a huge battle, and we felt we'd won it, but we hadn't. I just felt that was such a shame because, you know, with our area, it's right in the middle of the whole area of the peninsula. It's still there, but the nurses' hospital, the nurses' area's gone. It's just going bit by bit. They've got some areas still working, but that was the battle.
Changed the purpose of the hospital.
Yeah, that was a sad tale of we thought we'd won the battle and we hadn't.
Well, the New South Wales Health Department probably had their minds made up on that one a long time ago.
They were determined to get rid of two. I remember there was this fellow in charge of the health in the area, and I was the chairman of the various committees of councils. We were meeting down at Manly, and he said, now this is what we want to do, sell Manly, send Mona Vale and build a hospital at French's Forest. I said, if you do that, you'll have a fight on your hands. And it was a good fight. We fought it long and hard, and eventually lost it, same as we did Pittwater. But nevertheless, I don't feel it's a loss. I feel that we gained what we gained over those 22 years. And
do you think you still managed to save the land, at least at Mona Vale? Because
I think they know that all of a sudden we'll rear up if they try and do anything with that land. They know if they use it for medical purposes and various things like that, but this community will rise again if they try and do that. So, and I'd be heading it, I tell you.
Yes.
I'd fight for that again. The reason why, when I stepped down from council, I felt like when you're there and you can make a difference, make a difference. Once you can't, then let those who can make a difference make a difference. And so I've got no regrets about Pittwater Council. I think it was a fabulous achievement, and I think the people of Pittwater should be proud that they backed us all the way, and they did. They backed us all the way through the fight, through the voting for a separate Pittwater. The community were fantastic, and I just think the community should be proud of what we've achieved because of their backing. We always had a saying that the council was to preserve, protect and enhance the natural and the built environment. And I think we did that. And for me, my motto was from the community for the community. Nothing else, just what was best for the community, and I think I achieved that. So I'm proud of what we achieved.
The council was still pretty young at the point that you were sort of helping to form what it would become. And
yes.
You were, my recollection of the time is that you were a very stable influence. Like you helped build that council into what it became.
I think, I mean to say, I was always communicating with the community, with my editorials and so forth, and writing the poems. I don't write so many poems now. I used to. I don't know what they thought of that, but I had a bit of fun. But I think you're right. I think that, you know, it was a stable council under me. Like before that, there was often a lot of controversy, a lot of angst, but really it was quite peaceful times when we achieved a lot.
That is certainly my recollection, and you know, I think we were both a fair bit younger at the time, and you tend to remember things in history much more fondly than they occur at the moment. But I remember it being a period where there was still some arguments happening with Warringah about division of assets, debts, a whole bunch of other things, and I don't remember an awful lot of help in that process. I remember Pittwater essentially being a bit cast adrift.
They felt they'd been got at, but couldn't do much about it.
Yeah, I suppose from their perspective it was fair enough.
Yeah. I mean, to say they didn't want to lose us. I mean, say it used to be, you know, Pittwater was the cream on or the cherry on the top of the cake, and all of a sudden it disappeared, and they weren't happy at all. I mean, say I always remember a cartoon, and it was it had I suppose it was I'm trying to think what it was. It was a lizard, a great big lizard, and the lizard was trying to swallow one, which was Manly. They were trying to swallow Manly, and the tail hopped off, and that was Pittwater. It was such a funny cartoon.
So what's your recollection of that time in terms of the difficulty versus the pleasure? So how much pain versus how enjoyable was it? Was it unenjoyable at the time, but nice on reflection? How did you feel about it?
No, I never regretted being on council. I found that much more pleasure than pain, because we were striving all the time, striving to achieve the impossible with such a limited budget. It was always never easy. It was always, how can we do it? It wasn't a given that we could do something. We had to, how can we do it? Had to find ways around. I remember Chris Hunt. He was so wonderful he was one of the directors, when we were trying to save the escarpment, you know, the environmental committee, etc. He found ways to do things. He also did the work right around the foreshore to Church Point, that lovely walkway, etc. He was involved with that. So we had some lovely staff. As I said, I thought Angus Gordon was amazing. He was such, if you were mayor and you wanted something done, he'd try and find a way to do it. And I may say a mayor obviously can do nothing. They might have desires, but if they don't have the backing of staff, I just found the staff were wonderful and so supportive. And I could only ever say that my experience on council was a great experience, and I never regretted a day of it. They're talking about affordability in Pittwater, and there's no affordability in Pittwater. It'll never be somewhere you can. And I said, the only way you can have it is if you have accessory dwellings. Extra dwelling, either an older person could split their home and if you could work out a way to have accessory dwellings, we could have affordability. And Rav Shogi was Premier at the time, and I spoke to him about it, and just went, you could see no interest whatsoever. And Angus took me down to meet the staff, the government staff at the Labor Party at the time, and I told them my idea of accessory dwellings. And eventually, after quite a long battle, Pittwater had the ability to have it, which they call granny flats now, accessory dwellings we call them. And what they did it right throughout the state at the same time, and much as say, if it works for them, it'll work for them. And I still think, if done properly, that people have the ability to let half their house, like you know, half their house, etc. If they could do that, people nurses, doctors, or anyone that was in the services, or they could get somewhere they could live. I mean, say Pittwater's full of granny flats anyhow. May not be legal, but they're full of them. And it's nice to see families managing, mothers and kids, and so that was one thing that I thought a little fight for, and to see it happening now, I hope it's working for people, but it was just an idea. I don't really have regrets because we achieved so much. If we hadn't have achieved so much, you might have said, oh, if we had have done this or that. But in our short life, we did so much, saved so much. There was Lucinda Park. There were lots of things done, small things that aren't mentioned. You know, different commemoration. I remember there was another one. Dorothy McKellar. Anyhow, there was lots of things that were done that almost just quietly happened, and that you could be proud of if you went out and you say, oh yes, that and that and that. The council would probably have records of all the things that we did. And of course, as the staff change and these things get forgotten, and you forget yourself. I mean, say if you go back through the records that my husband kept for me while my term of mayor, I'm saying, oh, that's right. I remember I was fighting in the brothels at one stage. The kids had to go past the brothels and it was in the wrong place, and just, you know, there was a brothels task force. There was migration task force. There were all kinds of task forces. One of my main battles that I really battled for was the Barrenjoey Lighthouse. I was on the National Parks and Wildlife Advisory Committee. I was chairperson, and they were virtually going to just close it down and say it's too hard in the hut. And I said, you're wrong. Barrenjoey is really important. And I was encouraging Chris McIntosh at the time. He was the head person in the committee I was on anyhow. And I said, if you could only get that road up to the lighthouse fixed, and we battled to, I honestly think he probably came to grief over it because he did help get that road up to the lighthouse. He also got the new roofs on them, and in other words, people go up there now and they use it in ads and so forth, and I thought that, had I not been on that committee, that would have just been closed off because there was, in the too hard basket, it was going to cost too much for the road, the roofs, etc.
I remember that road. It was a difficult road even to walk up.
It was terrible, just you break your legs. But now they've done it, and I was proud of that. That was just one of the things that to be proud of.
Now, before we wrap up, is there anything that we've missed? Is there anything you feel?
Oh, not really. Look, life goes on, doesn't it? But my whole thought is they can't stop what we've saved. We've saved so much. We should be proud, and we shouldn't regret a minute of the fight for Pittwater was worthwhile for what we saved. If that's what Pittwater meant, to save the things that we did, and there was quite a number of them, it was worth the fight just for that.